Hey comic fans, I'm Steve Boyd from ComicCollectorLive.com, and in this episode of the Mighty Marvel Mythology, we're going to talk about your favorite wall-crawling superhero, the Amazing Spider-Man. Now, unless you live under a rock or maybe in the sewers of New York City, you might have never heard of the wall-crawling superhero. Well, he's been on a cereal box or two, he's had a few action figures, you can find him on posters and t-shirts. This was totally planned, by the way. But haven't you ever wondered when a particular character in Spider-Man's mythology appeared? What happened in this issue that led to this happening? Well, that's what this episode's all about. We're going to talk about the Amazing Spider-Man starting from his very first appearance in Amazing Fantasy. And listen up, walloping web snappers, you're in for a treat because we're going to take you all the way back to Spidey's groovy roots. So suit up and let's do this! In June 1961, Marvel Comics published Amazing Adventures #1, which featured various short stories in each issue written by Stan Lee, with artwork by such legendary artists and creators such as Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, Dick Ayers, Marie Severin, and others. The title of the series was changed to Amazing Adult Fantasy with issue #7, and the series continued to feature a selection of short stories through issue #14. But the series would undergo one more title change to Amazing Fantasy with issue #15 in mid-1962. One of the stories featured in the issue was an 11-page story called Spider-Man. This now legendary comic featured the first appearance and origin of Peter Parker and his amazing alter ego. This issue also features the first appearance of many supporting characters who will be a key part of Peter's life and Spider-Man mythology, such as Flash Thompson, Peter's Uncle Ben, who is murdered by a burglar in this issue, Liz Allen, and Peter's Aunt May. Even though this was the last issue of Amazing Fantasy that would be published until a short 3-issue revival in 1995, Spider-Man was successful enough that Marvel gave the character his own title, The Amazing Spider-Man in 1963, written by Stan Lee with artwork by Steve Ditko. In Amazing Spider-Man #1, we're introduced to J. Jonah Jameson, publisher of the Daily Bugle newspaper, JJ's son John Jameson, and the villainous Master of Disguise, the Chameleon. This issue also features an appearance by Marvel's first Silver Age family, the Fantastic Four. Besides setting up the ongoing plot device of Spider-Man being portrayed as a public menace by Jameson, Amazing Spider-Man #1 is the first time we actually see Spider-Man exhibit his famed spider sense, which warns him of danger before it happens. At the end of the story, fans are also encouraged to write in and send letters to the Spider-Man letters page, the Spider's Web, which will begin in issue #3 of the series. Spider-Man's mythology continues to grow with Amazing Spider-Man #2. J. Jonah Jameson is introduced to readers as the publisher of Now magazine. Aunt May gives Peter his Uncle Ben's old camera, and Peter decides to take photos of himself fighting a new villain introduced this issue called the Vulture to sell to Jameson for extra money, which begins Peter's long-time love-hate freelance photo work with Jameson. Peter makes some adjustments to Spider-Man's costume, including a belt to hold additional canisters of web fluid for his webbing. Readers are also introduced to Phineas Mason, aka the Tinkerer, who puts together a gang of thieves disguised as aliens intent on invading Earth. In the story, the readers are shown a diagram explaining how Spider-Man's web shooters work in this story. It's also important to note that it will be revealed later in Spider-Man's history that one of the criminals in Mason's gang is a man named Quentin Beck. Remember that name because he'll be back. In Amazing Spider-Man #3, Peter's confidence as Spider-Man is at an all-time high until he meets Dr. Otto Octavius, an inventor and scientist who tragically has a set of mechanical arms attached to his body in a radioactive lab explosion and can now control them with his mind. Calling himself Dr. Octopus, he takes on Spider-Man and wins. After Doc Ock's victory, Peter begins to struggle with whether or not he should continue his career as a superhero. After attending a motivational speech by Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch of the Fantastic Four, Peter's faith in himself is restored, and using his powers and scientific ingenuity, he is able to defeat Octavius. By the end of the issue, readers will have been introduced to Spidey's Spider Signal, which is attached to his belt. A friendly teenage rivalry begins with the FF's Human Torch, and an awesome pinup page of Spider-Man with artwork by Steve Ditko at the end of the book. Also, J. Jonah Jameson is back to being editor of the Daily Bugle instead of just Now magazine. In the pages of Amazing Spider-Man #4, we see a lot more characterization of Peter Parker's character as he continues to struggle with finding a balance between being a teenager in high school and a costumed crime fighter. He's trapped in a vicious cycle of his obligation to crime fighting as Spider-Man while taking photos of himself to sell to Jameson, who only wants to expose Spider-Man as a menace to the people he's trying to help. This issue is the first appearance of the Sandman, a criminal with complete mastery over his body, which has been turned turned into sand. We are also introduced to J. Jonah Jameson's secretary, Betty Brant, who will become a potential love interest for Peter. Pete's financial woes continue to plague him as he asks Jameson to be prepaid for photos of Spider-Man. And in a side subplot, Peter misses a date with Liz Allen, which is one of the girls who is often seen hanging out with Pete's high school nemesis, Flash Thompson. And speaking of Flash Thompson, we finally see Peter push back against Flash's constant bullying for the first time. But Pete himself stops in fear that his spider powers might actually injure Flash, and looks even more like a bookworm in the eyes of all of his peers. Now, on to Amazing Spider-Man number 5. After Dr. Doom fails to convince Spider-Man to become a bad guy, Flash Thompson takes center stage in this issue. Flash doesn't like how puny Parker talks about Spider-Man and decides to play a prank on him dressed as the superhero. But Flash's costume must have been quite convincing because Dr. Doom mistakes Flash for the real Spider-Man and takes Spider-Flash hostage in an attempt to lure the Fantastic Four into a trap. Of course, Spider-Man foils the fiendish plot and Flash gets all the attention. Some interesting things to note in this issue: Pete starts to wonder if he might be developing feelings for the Daily Bugle secretary Betty Brant, and with issue number 5, Amazing Spider-Man is popular enough to become a monthly published title instead of every 2 months. Amazing Spider-Man number 6 is the first appearance of Dr. Curtis Connors along with his wife and son, but longtime Spidey fans will know that Kurt Connors is the monstrous misfit of science, the Lizard. Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson travel to the Florida Everglades to get the scoop on the mysterious swamp creature for the Daily Bugle. And that pretty much covers everything that's Spidey significant from Spider-Man's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy 15 through the first 6 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, both published by Marvel Comics. For more great comic book information, be sure to check out Comic Collector Live, your #1 comic book resource, website, and marketplace. Thanks for watching, and if we missed something that should have been pointed out, please put it in the comments below this video. Stay tuned for more in-depth information on some of your favorite comic characters and issue significance in our future videos. Well, that's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Mighty Marvel Mythology. If you like what you saw, if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, be sure to subscribe so you can find out all kinds of other fun comic book and toy and video game related information, including my show that I do, Super Mega Comic Action News at Midnight. But in the meantime, stay tuned for more episodes of the Mighty Marvel Mythology. We've got a lot of ground to cover and very little time to do it. So we'll see you next time.